two attacks, Larry. One of them on Iran. Before the attack on Iran, it was an attack on Russian nuclear bombers. The
Right.
same sort of strategy. And with the attack on Venezuela, we had the attack on Putin's residence, and then Venezuela. Do you think that as time goes by, the Russian part would say, who's behind all of this? Who's managing all of this? Is it Donald Trump?
Yeah,
Is
it's a
it
good question.
someone?
It's a good question. One that's difficult to answer. There are all kinds of possibilities out there. Probably the most pregnant one is the one that says the people who own the banks, own the money, are trying to figure out where they're going to shift their flags to and so forth. Sort of like the Rothschilds when Wellington was engaged at Waterloo, and the word went back that the Allies had lost, and they shifted their money, and then the word came back that the Allies had won, and they had already shifted their money the other way. That's kind of the way these people operated, and they're far more sophisticated today, and they're in the shadows of all the major countries. They're not just in the empire; they're everywhere. Um, that's a pretty good argument. It kind of boils down to it's private people controlling state monies, and it's hugely affected, for example, by were we to suddenly nationalize our banks. If we were to do that, that would be the most deadly thing we could do to these people's lives, their fortunes right now at this minute. Not that they wouldn't recover ultimately and fight back and win because they're awfully powerful, but that could be what is orchestrating a lot of this. And people say, oh, that's freaking conspiracy theory. I'm sorry, dudes. That's what's been running the world for about the last 500 years, and probably before that if we knew about it. I had a Iranian American have lunch with me yesterday. I don't know if you know him, um, Afshin Zand, and he's a somewhat of an expert on Cyrus the Great, and we were talking about Cyrus the Great, the Persian Empire in general at that time, and how the Jews kind of looked at Cyrus, and the Jewish term for Cyrus in many documents is Messiah. They looked at Cyrus as the Messiah because he was so kind to them and so careful of them and so tolerant of them. And we got to talking about how do you duplicate that today? Well, we don't have it today. What we have is the other side. In the history, you actually have this dichotomy between if you will, in terms everyone today can understand, the Christ and the Antichrist. And that Christ and that Antichrist, that Messiah and that anti-Messiah, if you will, are all in the Jewish population. And what Cyrus did was recognize that, and he excoriated the one and helped the other. And what we have today is the same phenomenon, and no one's doing anything but helping the darker side. And we need someone quickly to start helping the brighter side. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the history lesson I got yesterday at lunch. Um, there's something to that, and there's something to the whole business of evil and good and how they get arranged in the world and how they get financed. Both of them, how they get financed. And the extraordinary thing is sometimes you will find, and I'll throw Gates into this. I'll throw others like Gates, Bezos, I'll throw him into it. These people who are supposed to be humanitarian, and doing this and doing that, you got black and white in there because some of the things they're doing, like selling pharmaceuticals to Africa at reduced costs that are years beyond their expiration dates and making a fortune of it and calling it humanitarian action, are on the other side. They're on the dark side. They're not on the good side, but they want them to be on the good side. And all this to say, who the hell knows who's actually behind the curtains running everything? But there is something, the Turks were right when they invented the term deep state. There is something deep. And right now, that deepness is evil. And there needs to be some leavening of that. We need a Cyrus. We need someone like Cyrus the Great, a Messiah. We need someone who sees the darkness gaining so much ground and brings in the light. It ain't Donald Trump. If you examine some of Charlie Kirk's work, yeah, yeah, Matt, the TP talking point,
TP,
you had, yeah. If you examine some
turning
of that,
turning point USA, Larry.
yeah,
TP USA.
Turning Point USA, yeah. If you examine some of their early debates and some of his own personal talks, he's kind of onto that, and he's admirable when he's onto that. Like Tucker Carlson, for example, today when he talks about Christianity. I mean, Tucker said some things that were anathema to me in the past, and so did Kirk. I mean, terrible things as far as I'm concerned. But some of the things they said, and lately some of the things Charlie Kirk was saying, and partly why he was killed, I think, not just the Israel bit, but the bit that he was questioning his own original conception of the world. And I think Tucker's doing that too. He's still got that Christianity hanging out there big time, but at least it's the Beatitudes Christianity. It's the Sermon on the Mount Christianity rather than the hell and brimstone of Franklin Graham, for example. Kill all those women and children and the lambs and excoriate the, get rid of the olive groves and everything else, Franklin Graham. I'm being I'm being almost theological here, but you do have this tendency in the world to shift between the two poles. And right now, we are on the dark side of the moon. And Trump is the orchestrator of that darkness. And they thought he was going to be the orchestrator of light. Look at what, one of our members of the Eisenhower Media Network sent me her text to Tulsi Gabbard about intervention, about wars of intervention, about wars of choice, and so forth. And Tulsi's response. And Tulsi's response was right out of my book, my playbook, right out of her playbook. Look at Tulsi now. Dead set against interventionism, dead set against doing the kinds of things we just did in Venezuela, and that Trump is suggesting we might do to Greenland and God knows who else, and to Iran, along with the most insidious, evil man on the face of the earth, Bibi Netanyahu. And Tulsi's just sitting there. Go figure that one.
Larry, you know that the movement, the MAGA movement, the basis, the foundation of the movement was based on, because Donald Trump is an outsider. He's not part of the deep state. He's against the deep state. But as time goes by with Trump 2.0, is he and his administration becoming a total tool in the hands of those you call the bankers who are in power, who are behind the scene running the show?
Miriam Adelson is a card carrying, certified, bona fide. Her husband was the primary member of the deep state. No question in my mind. Miriam Adelson is. So you asked me about Donald Trump. He's so far up her derriere that he can't see. And you could name some others too. You could go off on Peter Thiel. You could go off on Elon Musk. You could go off on Robert Mercer. You could go off on Charles Koch. I mean, we both could name a half a dozen of these people without even thinking hard about it. They're people who believe the world belongs to them, that their billions, and in Musk's case, trillion now, make them different, make them people who should be preserved in terms of their lifeblood. Their genes should be put on ice and kept around for ages and ages. These are different human beings, and yet they're not. We've had these kinds of people throughout human history. It's just that technology and money today, and the way we've shaped global capitalism, I call it predatory capitalism, have made them so powerful that if we don't do something about the very economic system that we spawned and put in the world, and China has taken to the nth degree, maybe to the nth degree that might, you know, not modify it, but mollify it a little bit. China's capitalism is not as predatory as ours, or Britain's, or Germany's, or France's. It is predatory only in the sense that they are typically imperial when power grows, and you then grow your military, grow your nukes, and so forth. And so the verdict's out as to whether or not China will be corrupted ultimately by the very same capitalism that has corrupted everybody else, primarily us, but our allies too. I don't know. I think that's a huge question for the 21st century. Is China capable of being different in the way it spreads its capitalistic wealth from the previous predatory capitalists? I don't know. That's a huge question. You would say, if guided by the precepts of the Central Party School, which are basically Confucian, yes, it could happen. They could mellow out capitalism, maybe even take to its next evolution. I don't know, but it's going to have to happen, or we're going to all destroy ourselves.
Larry, here is what Medvedev said, that the operation in Caracas became the best proof of the fact that any state must strengthen its armed forces to the maximum. When I'm talking about the maximum and strengthening that guarantees reliable protection of a country, means by the strengthening, he means that the only one thing that can strengthen the army, that is a nuclear arsenal. And
That's the,
he writes, long live nuclear weapons.
that's
I
the
think
danger of that's the danger of these kinds of precedents. Now, I don't for a moment think that world leaders will fall over to go develop nuclear weapons. One, they're too expensive, and two, they're too damn dangerous. But that's the kind of thing precedents like Trump has set do. What the precedent that should be set is the world looks at the United States and spurns it as much as is possible at this point, and it's going to become more and more possible as we collapse from this economic duress we're under. More and more of the world should spurn us, should not follow our lead, not do what Medvedev says and go develop nuclear weapons so we can hurl them at each other at the ultimate Holocaust, but take a different tact altogether. What I was just suggesting about the number one power in the world, China. China can lead this world if it really tries out of the mess it's in, the mess that basically we've contrived to make. I don't know if it will, and it scares me when I think about it, because what Xi Jinping is doing is what Medvedev was saying. He's building more nuclear weapons. He wants to match at least one of the big guys, Russia and the United States. And I wouldn't be surprised that once, when you whet your appetite this way, once you get to the matching of Russia with 6,000, the US with about 5,900, roughly 12,000 together, your tendency is going to want to match them both in combination. Now, maybe the alliance, tacit or otherwise, with Russia will attenuate that somewhat. As long as they maintain friendly relations, he won't try to match both of us. But that would be my guess, my most cynical guess, that ultimately the military will become so influential in China that they will try not only to match Russia's, but both Russia's and ours combined. And they've got the money to do it.
I think they have everything to do it, and they can.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump is giving each and every reason to them to do
Yep.
it.
Yep. Yep. I'd be sitting down in the Politburo right now, Xi Jinping in charge, and I'd be saying, should we do it? Should we say the same thing? Everybody copy down what Donald Trump has said. Should we say the same thing about Taiwan? Don't we have the same rationale about Taiwan? And isn't it even a greater national security threat to us? Or we could present here's an alternative. Wang Yi, I got an alternative, Mr. Xi Jinping. How about if we do this? We say, if you don't break your alliance with the United States, then we'll do it. Because that is what really makes Taiwan a national security threat to China, is the alliance with the United States. That would be an
How,
alternative.
Larry, how in the world Lindsey Graham became, the closest ally of the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself? It's
Nima,
beyond me.
I ask myself every day, how come Lindsey Graham was born? I can't, I can't answer that question. Why did a divine providence, as George Washington used to call whatever, allow Lindsey Graham to be born? Well, the same divine providence allowed Bibi Netanyahu to be born. They should go to their graves together, hugging each other. Lindsey would like that. Lindsey would like hugging Bibi.